When you turn on the television to watch an interview on a network that has historically served as a safe haven for a specific political figure, you expect a certain level of comfort, a certain level of softball questions, and a general atmosphere of agreement. For years, Donald Trump has utilized Fox News as his personal press office, a place where he could go to rally his base without fear of fact-checking or confrontation with hard data. However, what we just witnessed was a tectonic shift in that dynamic, a moment so brutal and so undeniable that it seemed to short-circuit the former president's ability to process reality in real time. We are looking at a situation where the data is no longer being spun. It is being presented in stark, undeniable red ink, and the reaction from the man at the center of it was nothing short of a psychological collapse. The network put up a graphic that was essentially a sea of red, showing disapproval ratings that would end the career of any normal politician. We are talking about 59% disapproval on their own polling, with other major outlets like the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal corroborating these disastrous numbers. This isn't just a dip in the polls, this is a statistical catastrophe that paints a picture of an administration or a campaign that is completely underwater, struggling to find the surface while the political currents drag them further down into the abyss. The immediate reaction from Donald Trump to this confrontation was a masterclass in denialism, a reflexive retreat into a fantasy world where any number he doesn't like is automatically branded as fake. It is fascinating to watch the cognitive dissonance play out live on air. He simply cannot accept that the American people are turning on him, so he attacks the messenger even when that messenger is his preferred network. He claims that he has the best polling numbers ever, a statement that is not just a little bit of an exaggeration, but a complete fabrication that is easily disproven by looking at literally any data set available today. When he says he is winning in a landslide in his head, while looking at a screen that says he is losing by double digits, we are witnessing a leader who has completely severed his tether to the truth. He starts rambling about fake polls and fake stories, recycling the same tired grievances that he has used for nearly a decade. But you can see the panic in his eyes. He knows that these aren't just numbers on a screen. They are a reflection of a public that is exhausted, frustrated, and increasingly looking for an alternative to the chaos he brings. He tries to rewrite history, claiming that he was polling poorly before his previous victories. But the reality is that he has never been this unpopular, this consistently for this long. What makes this moment even more significant is the specific demographic breakdown that is driving these numbers. We aren't just talking about Democrats who never liked him. We are seeing a collapse among independents and even soft Republicans who are looking at the economic reality and realizing that the promises made were never kept. The anchor described it as pushing a car uphill, a metaphor that perfectly captures the futility of trying to sell a product that the market has decisively rejected. Trump has 9 months to turn this around. But how do you turn around a narrative when you refuse to acknowledge the starting point? You cannot fix a problem that you deny exists. He is standing there claiming that he is at a historic high while the rest of the world sees a historic low. And that gap between perception and reality is where his campaign is going to die. The Democrats are, as the anchor noted, juiced and ready to vote, driven by a desire to reject this specific brand of gaslighting. Meanwhile, Trump is left with nothing but his own delusions, insisting that he is leading a race that everyone else can see he is losing. It is a level of political malpractice that is stunning to behold, a refusal to pivot or adjust because his ego simply will not allow him to admit that he is not the beloved figure he believes himself to be. The visual of the red map and the red numbers is seared into the minds of the viewers, and it serves as a reality check that no amount of rally speeches can overcome when Fox News of all places tells you that you are losing the economic argument and that the American people disapprove of your performance by nearly 60%. The game has fundamentally changed. Trump tried to pivot to his usual talking points about the fake news media, but the energy wasn't there. It felt tired, it felt desperate, and it felt like a man who knows the walls are closing in. He mentioned seeing a poll that had him at 40% and immediately dismissed it, claiming he is much higher. But he offered no proof, no counter data, just his own word against the world. This is the strategy of a man who has run out of options. He can't run on his record because his record is unpopular. He can't run on the economy because the voters don't trust him on it. So he runs on fantasy. He runs on the idea that there is a secret majority out there that loves him, a silent wave that will wash away the bad numbers. But elections are decided by real votes, not imaginary ones, and the real voters are sending a message that is loud, clear, and absolutely devastating to his prospects. We also have to analyze the role of the interviewers in this scenario, who seemed almost apologetic for having to present the facts. They know their audience and they know their guest. Yet the data was so overwhelming that they had no choice but to show it. This indicates that even the propaganda machine is having trouble hiding the magnitude of the failure. When the shield cracks, the person hiding behind it gets exposed. And that is exactly what happened in this segment. Trump was left naked before the audience, stripped of the comforting lie that he is invincible. He looked small, he looked defensive, and he looked like a loser for a man whose entire identity is built on winning. Being confronted with empirical evidence of his status as a loser is the ultimate injury. It cuts through the bluster and hits the fragile core of his narcissism. He can shout fake news all he wants, but he went home that night knowing that the red ink on that screen is the true story of his political life. Right now, the water is rising, the car is rolling back down the hill, and he is running out of time to hit the brakes. This segment serves as a perfect microcosm of the entire Trump political phenomenon in its current state, a collision between a catastrophic reality and a delusional fantasy. The voters are screaming that they are unhappy, that they are struggling, and that they want change. Trump is screaming back that everything is perfect, that he is the greatest, and that the only problem is the media. It is a dialogue of the deaf, but only one side has the power to decide the election. As we move closer to November, this disconnect will only widen. The more the polls drop, the more desperate the denials will become, and the more erratic the behavior will be. We are watching a slow-motion implosion, broadcast live in high definition. And the brutal truth is that no one can save Donald Trump from the reality he has created for himself. The red numbers are not going away, they are the scoreboard, and right now he is losing the game by a margin that is humiliating. Following the disastrous presentation of the polling numbers, the responsibility of spinning this catastrophe fell to G. Devance, and watching him attempt to navigate this minefield was a lesson in political contortionism. It is often the role of the running mate or the surrogate to clean up the mess, to provide context, or to offer a hopeful vision for the future. But in this instance, Vance was tasked with defending the indefensible. He sat there and listened to the data that showed his boss was underwater with the American people, and his immediate instinct was to deflect blame onto the current administration, despite the fact that the conversation was centered on Trump's current standing and his future prospects. Vance's strategy was to invoke the ghost of the Biden administration, blaming them for the highest peacetime debt and skyrocketing inflation, a talking point that ignores the massive spending and debt accumulation that occurred under Trump's own watch. It is a convenient amnesia that permeates their entire economic messaging, pretending that history started the day Biden took office and ended the day he left, while completely absolving themselves of any responsibility for the structural issues they left behind, or are currently exacerbating. The metaphor of pushing a car uphill was adopted by Vance, but he twisted it to suggest that the reason the car is heavy, not because the current driver has taken the wheels off. He spoke about Americans losing purchasing power, citing a figure of $3,000 lost in take-home pay, and then tried to claim a miraculous turnaround of $1,200 gained in a single year. These numbers, thrown around without citation or context, are designed to create a feeling of momentum where none exists. The reality is that the economic recovery, specifically in the manufacturing and construction sectors that Vance tried to take credit for, is largely the result of legislative achievements like the CHIPS Act and the infrastructure bill legislation that Republicans largely opposed. It is the height of political cynicism to demonize a policy when it is being debated in Congress, and then claim credit for the jobs it creates when the factories start opening. Vance is standing in the middle of a construction site funded by his political opponents, pointing at the steel beams and saying, "Look what we did." While the actual architects of the project are standing outside the gate, Vance then pivoted to the promise of future relief, dangling the carrot of no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, No tax on Social Security is the magic bullet that will solve the affordability crisis. This is classic populist pandering, offering specific targeted tax cuts that sound good in a soundbite, but do nothing to address the systemic issues of inflation, housing costs, or healthcare affordability. It is a strategy of distraction, hoping that if you promise enough people a small slice of the pie, they won't notice that the kitchen is on fire. He talks about a massive tax income refund coming around the corner, treating the federal tax code like a lottery ticket rather than a serious tool for economic governance. This approach betrays a fundamental lack of seriousness about the fiscal challenges facing the nation. You cannot fund the government, pay down the debt, and maintain social safety nets by simply eliminating taxes on large swaths of income without a plan to replace that revenue. It is economic voodoo designed to win a news cycle, but destined to fail in practice. The discussion then turned to the voters in Wisconsin, a critical swing state where 70% of respondents cited affordability as their biggest concern. Vance's response to this was to offer empathy without a solution, claiming that nothing breaks my heart more than seeing families struggle. This performance of empathy is hollow when paired with policies that favor the wealthy and corporations over the working class. He talks about wanting people to afford a nice meal or a vacation, invoking the nostalgia of the American dream. But he fails to explain how tariffs, which are effectively a tax on consumers, will help achieve that. The Trump-Vance economic plan relies heavily on protectionism and trade wars, which historically lead to higher prices for the very goods that these families are trying to buy. By blaming the hole they were put in, Vance is asking the voters to ignore the rising costs of goods that would result from their own proposed policies. It is a shell game where they hide the cost of their agenda under the cup of blaming Biden. We must also scrutinize the claim that trillions and trillions of dollars are coming into the country to build new factories under their watch. While there is foreign investment in the United States, the boom in manufacturing construction is, as previously noted, a direct result of industrial policy passed before they took the stage. Vance is trying to co-opt the narrative of American renewal, painting a picture of a booming economy that contradicts the very disaster narrative he used just seconds earlier. You cannot simultaneously claim that the economy is a wreckage left by Biden, and also claim that there is a massive boom in factory construction that proves your success. The cognitive dissonance required to hold these two thoughts in your head at the same time is staggering. They want the voters to feel angry about the economy when looking at the past, but hopeful about the economy when looking at Trump, even though the positive indicators are lagging, effects of the previous administration's work. This segment with G. Devance exposes the intellectual dishonesty at the heart of the campaign's economic message. They have no new ideas, only grievances and stolen credit. They rely on the public not understanding the lag time between legislation and economic output. They rely on the voters forgetting who passed the infrastructure bills and who tried to stop them. Snorts Vance's role is to muddy the waters to make the timeline of economic events so confusing that the average voter just gives up and votes on vibes. But the vibes are bad, as the polling shows. The people in Wisconsin and across the country know that their grocery bills are high, and they are not buying the story that a tax cut on tips is going to fix the structural problems of the economy. They need real solutions, not performative empathy and misplaced blame. Vance is pushing that car uphill. All right, but he's pushing it with the parking brake on, and the voters are watching him struggle with a mix of pity and disbelief. One of the most brazen aspects of this entire exchange was the discussion regarding manufacturing and the Trump economy, where the former president attempted to gaslight the public on a scale that is truly breathtaking. When asked to define when the economy officially becomes his, Trump declared, "We're there now," and immediately launched into a fantasy about a GDP of 5.6%. He claimed that without a Democrat shutdown, he would have reached 7%, a number he mused might be the highest ever seen. This is not just hyperbole. It is a detachment from economic reality. The actual GDP growth numbers are nowhere near these fantasies, and attributing a mythical loss of points to a political squabble is a convenient way to explain away the failure to meet these imaginary targets. Trump is taking credit for an economy that is currently functioning on the momentum of previous investments, specifically the infrastructure and technology investments made during the Biden years, while simultaneously claiming that he has created a miracle that the world has never seen before. The specific claims about factories and car plants are where the lies become most tangible and most easily debunked. Trump insisted that car plants are coming in from Canada, coming in from Mexico, they're leaving Germany, Japan, they're all coming into the United States. He painted a picture of a global exodus of manufacturing flooding into American borders. However, the data simply does not support this narrative of a sudden, overwhelming wave of relocation driven by his presence. While there is construction happening, it is largely the result of long-term planning and incentives from the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, policies that Trump has vowed to dismantle or criticize. He is effectively pointing at a building that was commissioned by his rival and putting his name on the marquee. When pressed on when these jobs would appear, his answer was vague, claiming they are already seeing it in construction, shielding himself from the lack of operational factories by hiding behind the timeline of construction. This economic gaslighting is particularly dangerous because it attempts to rewrite the cause and effect relationship of governance. If the voters believe that Trump is responsible for the factos breaking ground today, they will reward him for the work of his predecessor. But the independent voters, the specific demographic that the polling shows he is losing in droves, are proving to be more discerning. These are the voters who do not simply consume partisan media. They look at the results and they dislike chaos. The polling data indicates that independents are drastically disliking Trump right now, a huge red flag for any campaign. These voters are often repelled by government overreach and Trump's rhetoric about being a dictator for a day. His threats to use the military against citizens and his disregard for the rule of law are toxic to this group. They see a man who claims he can destroy the country himself, who threatens to withhold refunds on illegal tariffs, and who treats the presidency as a tool for personal retribution. The independent voter is the firewall against extremism, and right now, that firewall is burning hot against the GOP. These are people who pride themselves on not being beholden to a party line, who make choices based on policy and stability. When they see a candidate who promises to blow up the system, who creates uncertainty in the markets with whimsical tariff threats, and who engages in constant legal battles, they walk away. The economic stability they crave is the exact opposite of the Trump brand. They understand that tariffs are taxes on them, not on foreign countries. They understand that trade wars hurt American farmers and consumers. So when Trump tries too seldom a bill of goods about a manufacturing boom while simultaneously threatening the stability of the global trade order, independents see right through it. They are not buying the snake oil. And that is why his numbers with this crucial bloc are collapsing. Furthermore, the disconnect between the thousands of businesses being built narrative and the reality of small business struggles is palpable. While Trump doubts imaginary numbers, real business owners are dealing with high interest rates and labor shortages, problems that are exacerbated by his anti-immigration rhetoric and fiscal irresponsibility. The Trump economy he describes as a pimpkin village, a facade of prosperity erected to hide the rotting foundations. He speaks of trillions of dollars pouring in as if it is magic money, ignoring the complex realities of global finance. He claims to have spoken to President Xi and impressed him with this miracle, a classic Trump trope of seeking validation from authoritarian figures to bolster his domestic image. It is a performance for an audience of one designed to soothe his own ego rather than address the real economic anxieties of the American electorate. The independent swing voter sees a party that is not focused on policy but on power and the abuse of that power. They see the threats to the Supreme Court, the chaotic legal defenses, and the constant drama, and they decide that they want off this ride. Trump's inability to win over this group is fatal to his ambitions. You cannot win a general election with just your base, especially when your base is shrinking and the middle is expanding against you. The rejection from independents is not just a disagreement on tax rates, it is a rejection of his character and his governance style. They are saying loudly and clearly that they do not want a president who rules by decree and lies about the data. They want a steady hand. And Trump's frantic waving at imaginary factories only confirms that he is anything but steady. The huge red flag is waving, and it signals a potential landslide defeat if these trends continue. As we analyze the depth of Donald Trump's polling collapse, we must turn to the hard numbers provided by the data analysts who track these trends with historical precision. The segment featuring CNN's Harry Enan was a devastating deconstruction of the myth of Trump's political strength. The numbers are not just bad, they are historically awful. We are looking at net approval ratings that range from -19 to -26 points. To put that in perspective, being underwater by that magnitude means that for every person who approves of the job he is doing or the campaign he is running, there is a massive wall of voters who actively disapprove. This is not a divided country in the traditional sense. This is a country that has largely united in its exhaustion with one specific man. The sheer consistency of these negative numbers across every major pollster, AP, NBC, Quinnipiac, proves that this is not an outlier. It is the new baseline. The most damning part of this analysis is the concept of the floor. For years, pundits have speculated that Donald Trump has a hard floor of support, a percentage of the electorate that will stick with him no matter what he does. They estimated this to be around 40%, or perhaps high 30s, but the data from this second-term effort shows that he has crashed through that floor and found a new basement. He is polling worse now than he was at the same point in his first term. Think about that. After 4 years of chaotic governance, followed by years of campaigning, indictments, and media dominance, he is less popular now than when he was an unproven political novice or a struggling incumbent. He was 17 points underwater in term 1. He is 22 points underwater now. The trend line is going in the wrong direction, and there is no sign of a recovery. He is setting new records, foreign popularity, achieving a level of public rejection that is rare in modern American politics. The comparison to Joe Biden is perhaps the most stinging rebuke of all. Trump's entire campaign pitch is that Biden is a disaster and that the country is desperate for Trump's return. Yet the numbers show that Trump is polling significantly worse than Biden was at the comparable point in his presidency. Biden was 13 points underwater. Trump is 22 by every objective metric. The voters prefer the memory of the mess Trump claims to have inherited over the reality of the miracle Trump claims to offer. The voters have seen both men in action. They have lived through both presidencies, and when asked to evaluate them, they are judging Trump more harshly. This destroys the central pillar of the MAGA argument that there is a massive buyer's remorse in the country. There isn't. There is seller's remorse for ever buying the Trump brand in the first place. This data paints a picture of a political figure who is suffering from a terminal case of overexposure and under-delivery. The magic is gone. The rallies may still be loud, but they are smaller. The rhetoric may still be fiery, but it is repetitive. And the voters, especially the ones who decide elections, have simply moved on. They are tired of the drama, tired of the lies, and tired of the incompetence. The floor has collapsed because the people who were holding it up, the soft Republicans, the hopeful independents, the suburban voters, have let go. They have seen enough. When you are doing 5 points worse than your previous low, you are in a death spiral. There is no reservoir of goodwill left to tap into. Every time he speaks, every time he attacks a judge or lies about a poll, he digs the hole deeper. The implications of this for the down-ballot races are catastrophic. A leader at the top of the ticket, who is polling at -26, is an anchor around the neck of every Republican running for Senate, House, or governor. He drags the entire party down with him. Independent voters who might consider a moderate Republican are being repulsed by the toxicity at the top. The GOP is facing a potential wipeout, not because of liberal policies, but because they have tethered themselves to a sinking ship. Trump's insistence that he is popular, despite all evidence to the contrary, prevents the party from making the necessary course corrections. They are locked in the cargo hold of the Titanic, cheering for the captain as the water rises past their waists. In conclusion, what we witnessed on Fox News and what the data confirms is the end of an era. The spell has been broken. The emperor has no clothes, and the polling numbers are the child pointing it out. Donald Trump is running against reality, and reality is winning in a landslide. Can fake the polls in his head. He can lie about the economy, and he can blame Biden until the end of time. But the American people have the final say, and right now their say is reflected in those deep, dark red numbers on the screen. They disapprove. They are done, and they are ready for something else. The Trump term to fantasy is crashing into the hard wall of public opinion. and no amount of gaslighting can put the pieces back together. The car isn't just being pushed uphill, it has rolled back over the driver, and the voters are walking away from the wreck.